The BBC continues to be unable to see the wood for the trees when it comes to changing European attitudes towards mass immigration from the Third World. The new wave of patriotic nationalist parties are beginning to turn the tide against the globalist open borders activists, and in doing so will likely threaten the EU's continued existence. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that name, was interviewed by BBC presenter Emily Maitlis, and here's some of the highlights.
On World Refugee Day last week, you passed a new law which makes it illegal to help migrants. It criminalises helping undocumented immigrants, and that includes asylum seekers. Why would you do that?
She's referring to the Stop Soros bill that Hungary recently passed. It was designed to prevent any NGOs from continuing their illegal immigration activities. It's meant to sanction any organisations that facilitate illegal immigration into Hungary. But again, she sets up the question as, why are you being such a meanie? Why won't you let Hungary be irreversibly changed demographically and culturally by mass immigration, like my country's two largest cities, London and Birmingham, the latter of which was recently revealed that it has 50,000 locals who can't speak English? But this is where it gets good.
Hungary, then you have to count with the consequences. Right?
Yes.
Because anyone who lands in your country who calls themselves an asylum seeker has the right to have their papers and their situation examined. And you are now making it illegal, unless I've got that wrong, to help somebody find out or promote or
This is precisely the kind of bizarre thinking I've come to expect from progressives when it comes to immigration. The same people who say, no human being is illegal. Well, it's not illegal to be human, obviously, but there's a reason I have a passport, because I can use it to enter Hungary legally. If I don't bring the necessary paperwork with me, I won't even be allowed to board the plane to Budapest. Any attempt to enter the country without said paperwork would make me an illegal immigrant. What she's saying here I find infuriatingly frustrating. She says,
anyone who lands in your country who calls themselves an asylum seeker has the right to have their papers and their situation examined.
This is a virtue signal. There's no way she genuinely believes this absurdly illogical train of thinking. Anyone who lands in your country who calls themselves an asylum seeker. So all you have to do is call yourself an asylum seeker, regardless as to whether you actually are one or not, as long as you identify as one. Well, I identify as an oppressed non-binary unicorn with a peanut allergy. You just have to say that you are an asylum seeker, and the authorities have to listen and believe you. That's the first ridiculous part of her thinking. The second part is, has the right to have their papers and their situation examined. No, they don't. Right, they shouldn't have the right to demand anything of anyone. Hungary should have the right to defend its borders and determine who enters their country in the same way that you have the right to slam your door in the face of any person attempting to enter your home just because they knocked on your front door and demanded that you allow them in. It may sound immensely unfair, as I do acknowledge there are genuine asylum seekers attempting to flee seriously terrible situations in their own countries, but what she's suggesting here is that there be no limit to the number of people that have to be permitted entry, no respect for the rule of law when it comes to border security, and she's making a case for forced charity. If you walk down the street and a homeless person comes up to you and asks for some spare change, it's your choice whether you dig into your pocket and pull out a few dollars or euros. And if you do, good for you. But what she's proposing is akin to making it mandatory for everyone to stop, listen to the plight of the homeless person in the street, and then give them some form of aid. Of course, these people need help, but it should be an entirely voluntary contribution. Likewise, on the macro level of a country, Hungary should have the right to choose, and if it decides that charity starts at home, then that's fine. I should point out that Hungary will still take in asylum seekers, just not ones that are being shepherded into the country illegally by NGOs as part of a globalist agenda for a multicultural, open borders utopian vision of the world that will utterly destroy European identity.
When you look at Viktor Orban's words, he's compared immigration to a flu epidemic, he's talked of Muslim invaders, he's talked of Christian Hungary and a mixed population with no sense of identity, and he's called the people coming in potential terrorists. So this isn't actually about immigration, is it? It's about xenophobia.
No, I have to reject that, and I take it as an insult, what you have just said, because we Hungarians, we do have the right, and no one can take that away from us. We have the right to make our own decision, whom we would like to allow to enter the territory in Hungary, and who we do not allow to enter the territory.
So he's just made a perfectly reasonable and sound argument, I think. And now she's going to try to get a gotcha moment by overly simplifying the conversation.
The people that you don't want to come in are Muslims, is that right?
Just if you can let me finish.
That if you don't mind, because
I would like to I would like to answer your previous question, because that was concluded by a very serious insult against my country, and I have to reject that again, because I always have shown respect to everyone who asks me, but I expect respect not for myself, because who cares, but for my country and for the people I represent. And calling a country xenophobic, it's an insult, especially if you put into consideration Hungary. And no one can take away the right of decision of us with whom. Sorry.
The nightclub reserves the right to refuse admission.
With whom we would like to live together. And yes, it is our intention to keep Hungary a Hungarian country. And yes, we do not agree with those ones who say that multiculturalism is by definition good. If you say that, we respect that.
So you stand by this idea of Muslim invaders, right?
Sorry? This is modern BBC journalism here. Talk over his answers and try to demonize his party, misrepresent his views and push some leftist propaganda.
I stand by, of course, all of the statements of my Prime Minister, and stand by our position and stand by the position that if you allow hundreds of thousands of people to enter the territory of the European Union without control, without check, does it give the opportunity for the terrorist organizations to send their terrorists to Europe? Yes, it does. What we don't want is a massive illegal influx coming from the south to us. We want to keep Hungary a Hungarian country, and we don't think that multiculturalism is by definition good. If you think so, if people in this country think so, we respect that, no problem. But please don't put pressure on us.
A perfectly reasonable position to hold. If you love multiculturalism so much, then have at it. But don't try and bully other countries into committing cultural suicide along with you.
Journalists will tell you that press freedoms have been eroded, that they have a creeping sense of working for a PR dictatorship.
Oh, come on.
You know that public administration courts are being set up parallel to existing tribunals. There is a sense of erosion of the rule of law. This is no longer a democracy. It is a creeping authoritarianism in Hungary.
Creeping authoritarianism, that's rich. She's calling the rise of right-wing parties creeping authoritarianism when it's the EU that's the one pressuring countries to open their borders against their will. And oh yeah, it's the EU that's trying to censor and control the spread of information online with their new copyright legislation that will destroy the internet as we know it.
You do echo lies in this television. And I don't think it's fair that you are unbalanced, you are one-sided. You look only at the opinion of those ones who are frustrated because they lost elections. They wanted to fire that government.
Okay,
and that government won. That government won the third consecutive election with a constitutional majority. Why don't we respect the decision of the people?
At this point, she's barely listening to what he's saying. Anyway, the video has received mostly dislikes, as you might imagine, and the UK's state-funded national broadcaster isn't really all that interested in the views and opinions of the British taxpayers who fund it, because the comments are predictably disabled. It's almost like they're aware that comment sections have a habit of swaying public opinion more than the content itself.
The problem with the EU is it believes in tolerance, diversity and human rights.
But is it your
and
problem
you
or
are
what?
Rejecting them all.
But
so
why do
maybe
we do so?
it isn't for you.
Why do you insult a country of
Tolerance,
10 million people?
Diversity and human rights.
Yeah.
Because of the laws you're now introducing. They're not my laws. They're the laws of your government.
They are not.
Oh my God, she's smug. The moral grandstanding is nauseating. The EU is love. Freedom is slavery. War is peace. Ignorance is strength. Tolerance and diversity are just code words for cultural relativism and gradual demographic replacement of the native population.
Against the European values. They are not against the European values. I understand that the liberal mainstream doesn't like our laws. But we have nothing to do with them in this regard, because it is the Hungarian voters whose expectations we have to fulfill.
As John Waters said in his Irexit speech a few months back, the EU is not Europe and never was. European people, values, ideas, traditions, customs, history and European culture are what makes Europe European. The EU is a bureaucratic parasite that attempts to co-opt what it is to be European. The BBC may not grasp this yet, but that no longer matters. Hungary now has a government that is determined to allow the voice of the people to decide the fate of the country. If only we were all so lucky. Put an empty space to better use. Irish urged to house migrants in spare beds. Homeowners in Ireland have been asked to pledge spare rooms or vacant properties to house migrants for periods of up to a year as part of the government's Irish Refugee Protection Programme. And I'm sure Irish politicians will be leading by example. In a new national campaign urging people to put empty space to better use, the Irish Red Cross said, pledging a vacant property or spare room will play a significant and valuable role in helping Syrian refugees rebuild their lives and settle in Irish communities. And I'm sure Ireland's ability to determine whether a migrant is actually from Syria or not will be much more successful than every other EU nation for some strange reason. This sounds an awful lot like Sweden's policy of encouraging citizens to give up their holiday homes to migrants. As well as calling on homeowners to pledge spare beds or rooms, the charity also wants holiday homes, second homes, and any other vacant properties in Ireland to be offered up for the cause of housing migrants. So there you go, this is exactly like Sweden. Any asylum seeker or refugee housed through the scheme would be given a caseworker who provides them with education, healthcare, and employment support, explains the Irish Red Cross on its website. Oh, nice! If only native homeless Irish people and those barely above the breadline were afforded the same benefits as migrants fresh off the boat who've never paid a cent of tax to the Irish state in their lives. Meantime, Ireland is to take more refugees in show of solidarity. The Irish political elite is willing to do more on migration, including taking more refugees and giving financial support, said the Taoiseach. That's our Prime Minister. Speaking ahead of next week's June summit, where the migration issue could trigger a major political earthquake in Germany and across the EU, the Taoiseach committed Ireland to giving more as a way of repaying the solidarity Ireland has received over Brexit. That's a bit of a stretch. You know, I love how the arguments for a European nation to take in more migrants is always slightly different. So for the UK, the leftists will say, well, Britain is just taking in migrants from the very countries its former empire once invaded and colonised. So what goes around comes around. It's getting its just desserts. The coloniser is becoming the colonised. But of course, Ireland was never an imperial power that colonised anyone. We were colonised ourselves. So apparently, this has got something to do with repaying the solidarity Ireland has received over Brexit or something? People said nice things about Ireland in the wake of Brexit hard border talks. Okay then, let's begin the slippery slope of unending mass immigration into the country from completely incompatible cultures. Whoop! It's about solidarity and burden sharing, he said. We are in favour of the European Commission proposals to ensure that all countries share in taking refugees, and we're willing to do that. Correction. You're apparently willing to do that, Leo. I love how this decision is being made on behalf of the entire Irish population without a vote, but that is par for the course in the EU these days. It's almost like we live in a joke republic, where we have no real say in the future of our country. Can someone please ask if Leo will be taking in some migrants into his home? It's not like he doesn't have the space. He has no kids, and therefore no stake in the future of Ireland after all. I guess short-term virtue signalling is worth the long-term social breakdown that such policies generate. We've already given a commitment to accept 4,000, and they're mostly coming from Italy and Greece. That number is yet to arrive. So we haven't yet set a new figure as yet, but in principle, we're willing to contribute to all of them, he told the Irish Independent. Mr. Varadkar defended immigration, saying, on balance, migration is a good thing. Europe needs migration. We've a shortage of skilled labour to staff our economy and run our health service. It enriches our cultures and societies. What the hell is he talking about? Is this guy for real? What are you saying, Leo? We're not talking about skilled software developers immigrating into Ireland legally from the US and India here. We're not talking about skilled labourers to staff our economy and our health service, which is already overstretched thanks to mass immigration as it is. We're talking about taking in asylum seekers and refugees, Leo. People from poor developing nations, and many of whom will have limited to no command of the English language. You know this isn't about importing skilled labour. It's about housing migrants based on the demands of the EU. If it was about importing skilled labour, then we'd be carefully vetting people, wouldn't we? For God's sake, I just read how the Irish Refugee Protection Programme is requesting people to give up their spare rooms and holiday homes, and then they're giving them education and healthcare and employment support. Education as in, they're not skilled labourers because they obviously lack a sufficient education level in order to obtain a skilled job in the first place. You're being openly disingenuous, Leo. And finally, he says, it enriches our cultures and societies. How? Is it the no-go zones in France and Sweden, or the increase in Islamic terror attacks and child grooming gangs? In a new study, Sweden's Crime Prevention Council found that 48% of women in socially vulnerable areas, i.e. culturally enriched and diverse areas, indicate they feel unsafe in their own residential areas when going outside, compared with 30% of women in other urban areas. Leo, you're literally Ireland's Justin Trudeau. More to the point, Leo, Where are these people going to be housed? Obviously, the Irish taxpayer has to pay for it, right? But where are they going to be housed? Is it going to be like Listún Varna all over again? A small, tiny country town where the tiny population voted overwhelmingly in favour of the asylum centre not being set up there, and they were ignored. Sadly, Ireland continues its suicidal love affair with the EU and continues to lag behind other EU member states like Hungary and Italy, who now have credible resistance to the globalist agenda of multiculturalism and mass immigration. In short, people are not sufficiently awake here in Ireland just yet because the shit has not hit the fan as it has in other countries. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.